turns out Wyatt Kennedy is actually capable of doing V's character justice. How's it going, YouTube lovers? This is the Eabs Animator. Welcome back to another video. Today, I'm doing another edition of the Eabs Book Club because today we're here to talk about Murder Drones graphic novel issue 4. It's kind of feels like issue 5 because last time was Home, but that wasn't numbered, so this is technically issue number 4. Once again, it's written by Wyatt Kennedy and illustrated by Mi-Gyeong, who did issues 1 through 3. And as a V fan, I have never been more nervous going into this particular comic than any of the other ones because this has her biggest moment in the story as a part of this. It has like the arguably the biggest cliffhanger of the entire series is in the episode that this graphic novel is adapting. It's adapting episode 6, Dead End. So, yeah, like I said, the most nervous I've been going into this, but it's time to see if it will keep that impact of the episode's ending. So once again, I'm going to split this review into 3 sections like I always do. First, I'm just going to go over basically a summary of the plot that is shown in this graphic novel. Then I'm going to talk about what I didn't like from like changes or just general stuff I didn't like. And then at the last section, I like to end on positivity. I will talk about things that were changed that I actually do think were improvements. So that's, once again, the plan for today. And as always, I'm going to start this with a spoiler warning and an opinion warning. I'm going to be talking about the plot of the show and the graphic novel. And also I'm going to be giving my personal opinions on everything. So now that is all out of the way, like I said, they haven't handled V very well up to this point. Let's see how they handle her biggest moment in the show and get into this. As usual, we start the issue with a text exchange formatted whole thing between Uzi and N. And in it, they jokingly address the fact that the plot of the last issue, Home, can be quite confusing for a lot of people because it takes place in memories. It isn't an actual flashback. It's more like dream walking. Whatever, we've finished that story. I talked about it in the last video. But anyway, after that, we cut to not our main characters, but another worker drone, 029, who is trying to hide, but then she's attacked. We don't see what attacks her, we just see its tail, basically. But since fans of the show already know, we know it's one of the coolest designs in the entire series. Like, genuinely, I love the way these things look so much. Every time I rewatch that episode, it's great. But anyway, outside, like after we see that little scene of 29 getting attacked, so we know a little tease of what is coming. Back outside, we have one big reunion with pretty much every major player of the story all in one place. We got Doll, we got Jay, we got Tessa, we got N, we got V, and of course we have Uzi. So Tessa gets to explaining that Sin actually was the one that sent the disassembly drones to Copper 9. It wasn't the humans like they originally thought. It wasn't JC Jensen cleaning up loose ends. It was Sin that sent the disassembly drones. But before they can explain any further the fact that, like, wait, we've thought about this wrong the entire time. The humans weren't involved in that at all. But before we can get into that any deeper, Doll realizes the situation has changed and it may not necessarily benefit her the way the original deal did. So she takes the key bug back for herself and she escapes ahead of the group, diving into the underground labs, the Cabin Fever labs. Because these are actually labs that are right next door to Camp 98.7, which we saw in issue number 3. So that is where they all met up, but Doll takes the key bug back and runs ahead of the whole group into the lab. At the entrance, before they go in, Tessa and Jay reveal that Sin's plans not only included clearing landing sites of all robotic life, or just life in general, but also getting into Cabin Fever labs themselves, wherever they were across the planet. So Tessa sends off Jay to go get the landing pod and bring it around so that they have an escape option, But when that happens, Uzi goes up to Tessa and demands to know, why is Doll involved? What is happening to her? Because in reality, Uzi's actually asking what's happening about herself because she's dealing with some of the same changes and mutations that Doll is. And Tessa explains that Doll is sure that the humans that are at this lab, this cabin fever lab ran experiments on Doll's parents, specifically her mom, and then Doll inherited that strange sickness herself. So, sounds like, to Uzi at least, that this lab is the only way to get any answers about what is going on. So, Uzi, V, N, and Tessa all follow Doll into the labs in search of a secret elevator that Tessa explains can be unlocked using the key bug that Doll took, which is why it was so important. It is a literal key. That is why that bug is so important. Everyone's been clamoring after it. But almost immediately as they get into the lab, they find a pretty grim sight. Piles of dead disassembly drones. Just oil splattered everywhere, limbs strewn about. It's basically a mass gravesite. And Tessa's like, oh yeah, there's security here that is specifically designed to take out drones. Which, of course, 3/4 of this group here are drones, which is not a good sign for them. But Tessa's like, don't worry, I'm a human. I can take care of this human security. Yeah, except for the fact that she doesn't have access to the facility. Kind of forgot that one there. And it doesn't help even more that she immediately steps into a trap and gets dragged off away from everyone else. You really kind of suck at what you promised you could do here, Tessa. Just saying. But anyway, the trio races after her to go save her, but instead they find a creepy, laughing robot pill baby. Just a little baby robot playing Giggle.mp3. Yeah, no, that's not creepy at all, but like we've already established in like the home issue and stuff like that, N is the smartest horror protagonist that you have ever seen, and he immediately, Uzi also has the same idea, he immediately opens fire with his gun at the robot baby. And he was right to do so, because that robot baby immediately sprouts spider legs and like crawls away up into a vent in the ceiling. Oh gosh, still one of the creepiest things I swear that happens in this show. And there's a lot that happens in this show that's creepy. But anyway, that also was another trap, because as they ran down after the baby, behind them another drone appears, a worker drone, who throws out a disassembly drone arm and activates an EMP to knock the group unconscious. Fantastic. We barely got into the labs and immediately everyone has been captured and we still don't know where Doll is. I think this went really well, really swimmingly. Anyway, Uzi wakes up eventually, and she finds herself sedated with a magnet stuck to her head, and she's tied up basically to a hospital bed. And she's in a room with V, who's also sedated and tied up, but then also the worker drone that attacked them, a hillbilly type named Alice. And Alice is chopping up that poor drone 029 from the opening scene, basically harvesting her for spare parts as she's trying to scrounge to survive down in those labs. And she's getting ready to do the same to V, so Uzi warns her, hey, wait a minute. You're going to get like a big creepy worm, the hollow spooky snake crab, because she remembers what happened to Jay back in issue 2. But Alice is like, nah, I know that heat keeps them, sluggish. This isn't my first rodeo. So they're not only dealing with someone who's crazy, she's crazy and she knows what she's doing, which is a very bad combination for them. She also comments that not only does she know how to deal with disassembly drones, she also knows how to deal with what she calls witches, aka drones that have solver powers. And she even calls out that she hasn't seen 02 since she left them to die. 02, of course, being Nori, Uzi's mom. So Uzi, you may get some answers you're looking for anyway, because you found someone who actually knew your mom, which Uzi really never did. So, but anyway, while that's going on in another room, Alice's partner, the little pill baby, whose name is Bo, has N and Tessa tied up, and he is currently actively slicing and sawing into N to try to remove his heart and deactivate him. But he's interrupted because Alice radios in and says, oh, we got Nori's kid here, but I'm going to need more sedatives because she's a bit bitey. But it's Uzi. We wouldn't expect anything else from her. So Bo leaves, and Tessa takes that opportunity to free herself and then free N so that they can get out of there. When Bo gets to Alice and helps her sedate Uzi a bit more, though, Uzi's locked in on the fact that Alice mentioned Nori. She's like, hey, you knew my mom. What is going on here? Tell me everything you know about her. But Alice is not very helpful. She just goes, yeah, you're like her. But at the same time, she goes, yeah, she thought imploding them folks was pretty slick. So turns out Nori, uh, may have been just a wee bit violent, which, considering Uzi, her daughter, that's not actually that shocking. But Alice is also incredibly violent, and while she's, harvesting parts and just figuring out what she can do and just enjoying torture for the love of the game, she cuts off one of Uzi's fingers during that whole thing, so Uzi can regenerate from that, but the fact that she knows how to deal with solver drones and murder drones means that they're running out of time. So outside of that room, Tessa is talking to En and reveals that the solver had actually already destroyed Earth. There is no Earth that the disassembly drones came from because there is no Earth anymore. The Gala was just the beginning. Earth eventually, it took Sin as its first host, it massacred everyone at the Gala, and then it grew a full army of disassembly drones and took out everything. It just blew up the planet, basically. We see a live satellite feed was just shards of planet that used to be Earth floating everywhere. So En's like, that means you're here to fix Uzi so that doesn't happen, right? But Tessa tells him that is not the plan. The plan is that she's there to eliminate all the solver drones, which in this case is Uzi and Doll. And she tells En, you're gonna have to pick between the universe and one little drone that you care about. Pretty much setting up an X-Men The Last Stand kind of thing here with En and his claws being Wolverine and his claws, and Uzi with the solver being Jean Grey and the Phoenix. But before En can process any of this, because that's a lot to take in for someone he really cares about, they're attacked by robotic velociraptors. These are called the Sentinels, and they get in there because Alice realized that Tessa and Ed escaped, and so she remotely pressed a button and opened a door and let the Sentinels loose. These are the same things that attacked the drone at the beginning of the comic. So, yeah, they're really cool. They're the coolest designs. They've got 3 eyes on either side, and they move around really cool. I love dinosaurs anyway, so the Velociraptor design is great. And Alice, being the psycho that she is like, oh, I'm gonna enjoy watching this show as this Sentinel tears these guys apart. But then she hears Uzi talk behind her, except it's not actually Uzi. It's the solver temporarily taking control of Uzi's body to blow a hole in the wall of the room that they're in and let the Sentinels in. The Sentinels then attack Alice and Bo and kill them and start going for Uzi as well. V jumps in front of Uzi to try to protect her, eyes closed to try to avoid this flashing stun light that the Sentinels have, which we see them use on En and also on 029 at the beginning of the comic. But before she can do that, the solver protects itself again and uses its powers to basically just black hole crush the Sentinels that were in the room. So Solver's getting more powerful and is now able to straight up take control of Uzi's body. This isn't the same as when Uzi went crazy and started killing everyone at the camp. She was still Uzi at that point, just losing her mind because of the overheating. In this one, her eyes actually turn yellow, and so do her powers. That is straight up the Solver taking control of her, which means time is really running out. So V takes Uzi, and they reunite with En and Tessa, and they hide together until the rest of the Sentinels that are still wandering around the facility lose them, and they're able to move forward again. And when they do, they find Doll, stunned on the ground with the key bug in her hand. V immediately is like, well, obviously this is a trap, but Tessa doesn't listen and goes up and just grabs the key bug anyway. She's like, that's convenient. I don't care. And there's a sweet moment here, which is a little cut down from the show, but it's not too big a deal here, where Uzi and En are holding hands to comfort each other, which is adorable. But they don't really have time to dwell on that because Doll jumps up because, of course, V was right. Of course, it was a trap. It was the most obvious trap possible. And Doll opens a bunch of doors to let the Sentinels in after the crew, and she jumps down the elevator shaft after unlocking it with the key bug. So it was a trap that she set up, so she's given herself a way down, and she found a way to take care of the group that's following her. So they're on the back side of the elevator, though, because they can't get into the doors. It's facing the other way. So Uzi tries to use her solver powers to rip open a hole in the back of the elevator to let them in, but then her powers, again, are turning yellow, and her hand starts freaking out. So En slices off her fingers to try to stop it from happening, and he's like, Uzi, are you okay? But she's not okay, because her eyes flash yellow again, and the solver puts up a text bubble that says, miss me? Because it's getting worse. So V is holding off the Sentinels while the rest of the group gets onto the elevator, but instead of joining them, because, there's so many Sentinels that are approaching. V decides to make the ultimate sacrifice. She shoots through the elevator cable so that it falls, and she says goodbye to her former friends with a salute. Well, look at that. Turns out Wyatt Kennedy is actually capable of doing V's character justice. You wouldn't know from the previous issues, but here we are. It's also actually, the first time, like I said, it's the first time her character's done justice, because while she wasn't ruined in the home special, like I said in my previous review, she was barely in the home special, so there wasn't really much to ruin. The issues 1 through 3, they kind of assassinated her character. But in this one, she is like herself. She's still a bit snarky and doesn't really want to show that she cares for anyone. But when push comes to shove, she's going to do what she can to protect the ones she cares about, which in this case in particular is N, but she is growing fond of Uzi. So what do you know? V finally gets justice. You love to see it. And I will say that this is still very fast-paced in this comic. It doesn't play out it's very close, but it's not precisely the same as how this whole scene plays out in the show. But honestly, the show also has its own pacing issues, so at this point, it's not too much of a complaint for the comics, because, it has pacing issues. That means it's exactly like the show. But yeah, this was actually a pretty solid comic, in my opinion, when it comes to the Murder Drone stuff. Like this and Home, the best one of these for sure, because the second one was the worst one. Second one was just frustrating, and then 3 just completely destroyed V's character. But anyway, as solid as I thought this comic was, it is not without its faults, of course. So let's go ahead and get to the next section where I'm going to go over some of those key faults that I found. Even with the quick pacing, this comic is missing a few key moments from the show. So there's 2 in particular that I want to call out for this video. The first one is going to be a minor one, but it's still a pretty memorable part of the show, so I wanted to call out that it was missing. But then the second one, I think, is actually a pretty major plot point that sets up the twist that comes up in the next issue, so it feels weird that there's not even a hint at it. But anyway, the first thing I want to talk about, the one that's a more of a minor thing, but I still wish was included, is Bo's sacrifice. Because in the show, Bo, the little baby Pilljoy that was working with Alice, recognizes that it's best if he frees V when the Sentinels are attacking. He basically gives his life so that V can have a chance to protect Uzi and survive, because he has a chance to shoot the Sentinel, and it might work, but instead he uses what he has to free V before the Sentinel tackles him and rips him apart. In the comic, though, Bo doesn't really do anything. Like, not really. He's barely even in frame in the panel where the Sentinels break into the room and kill him and Alice. We don't even see either of them die. We just see the Sentinels break into the room, and then Alice and Bo are just gone in the panel after that. That just implied that they died when the Sentinels showed up. It was a great character moment in the show for this random side character that's just introduced in that episode, who actually ends up being kind of endearing, because it seems like he doesn't really want to be, a Texas Chainsaw Massacre style killer. It's just what Alice is telling him to do, and he's working with or for Alice or whatever. Maybe it's supposed to be Alice's kid in the pill body. I don't know at this point. I don't think their relationship was ever made clear. But it was just a fun little extra spice of flavor for the world and these characters that I feel like would have taken too much to keep in the comic. Again, it's just like, while it eats Alice, Bo is aiming, but then sees that V is struggling to get out, so frees her, and then as the Sentinel attacks him. It only needs to add a couple more panels to get that done, I feel like. Which I know what I'm saying. Oh, you have to add more panels. I get that can take a bit, because they each have to be hand-drawn. But at the same time, I feel like a couple panels out of something that is multiple panels per page is not a big deal in the overall scheme of things. And like I said, it was something that added a nice little bit of flavor to the world and added a bit of extra depth to these one-off characters that we got in this story. So yeah, I wish it was in there. Not a big deal, but I still wish it was there. But the second thing here that I noticed was missing is a lot more plot important, because it specifically has to do with the Sentinels. And like I said, it sets up the twist in the next part of the story. So when the Sentinels first attack En and Tessa in the show, one of the Sentinels, which later is known as Sparky by the fan base, bites Tessa's hand. Sparky realizes, oh, I just hurt a human. I violated the laws of robotics. And he just like self-deactivates, basically. He smashes his head into a wall and just shuts himself down. But he does reactivate again later and hunts Tessa down because he realizes that wasn't just blood and flesh that he bit into. Now, the first time I saw this in the show, and I'm sure this was true for a lot of people watching the show, I thought it was just, oh, that raptor acclimated a taste for blood. That makes it even extra dangerous. It doesn't care about humans anymore. But it turns out Sparky was actually the smartest one in the whole show when you think about it. He figured out probably the biggest twist of the show, which comes in like the next episode after the one that this comic adapts, before anyone else did. Sparky basically figured it out with that one bite. But in the comic, even though we do see like a small splash of blood when he attacks En and Tessa to imply that yes, Tessa did get injured there, it's not clear that anything really happens to Sparky. He still gets his red eyes later in the comic, but it's not even clear that that's supposed to be the same Sentinel that attacked them earlier. We don't even see what happens to him after the attack. We just see the initial attack, and then we go back to Uzi and V and all that stuff, and then when we get back to Tessa and N, the Sentinel's just gone. We never see what happened to Sparky in that time. Because, you know, if going back and rewatching episode 6 after the next episode came out, you realize episode 7's twist was set up quite a bit. There are a lot of clues surrounding Tessa for what that big twist for her is going to be in the next episode. But here in the comic, it's not really set up at all, which is a shame because I feel like the strength of this comic from an earlier thing that I praised was the fact that it did actually do a decent job of setting things up the way that it organized things. Like I said, moving the arrival of Jay and Tessa to the end of the camping issue made it feel like a lot more of a setup for when they show up at the end of Home and have their whole deal with Doll. It makes a lot more sense. But here, we don't get that setup for the episode 7 twist at all. Which, again, y'all know what I'm talking about. I know I said spoilers, but I'm still going to keep this one vague. But that's the real shame. Like, Sparky's uniqueness is basically completely written out of the comic. We don't even really get a spotlight on him during the final fight between V and the Sentinels, when the main fight there was between V and Sparky in the show. But it's just like, oh, there's a bunch of Sentinels. One just happens to have red eyes. We're not really elaborating on that at all. We just know one has to have red eyes, and so it's drawn that way. So Sparky's uniqueness is just completely gone. Because I love the mystery of this show. It is a huge reason why it became one of my favorite shows, is because there was the mystery that let me chew on things, let me theorize. It felt a lot like when I was watching Gravity Falls growing up. I loved it. But with all the streamlining that they've done to try to cram this story into graphic novel length and try to fit it in just, 6 issues, because Home wasn't even going to be here originally. It was just going to be 6 issues, but they added Home afterwards, which is why we got basically 7. But all that streamlining they've done is basically forgetting important details. Again, Sparky is actually key to the story. He sets up our twists that we get later. But if Sparky doesn't really matter, then the twist doesn't have the same setup. So I'm curious, like, there's obviously still setup for the twist when we get to the next story arc anyway, but it was really set up from the first time that we see a bunch of Tessa interacting with everyone. So it's just kind of disappointing. That was a huge tease for it when you went back and watched it, but it almost makes it genuinely makes it feel like Wyatt Kennedy just wrote this as he went, watching the show for the first time. That's how it comes across. It would explain like V's strange behavior. It would explain the lack of setup here. It just feels like he watched an episode, then wrote how it would be adapted into a novel, watched the next episode, then wrote how that would be adapted to a novel, and so on and so forth. That's how it feels this was written. It doesn't feel like he watched it all the way to the end and then went back and wrote it as he went. that's how it comes across, which is unfortunate. But I will say that while there was missing stuff here in the graphic novel, there were a few details, small things, that were added that I actually enjoyed. So before I wrap up this video, let's talk about those next. The first detail that I liked that was added here comes from early in the comic. After Tessa says that part of Sin's plan was to order the disassembly drones to go into the labs that were marked with the Cabin Fever logo, En makes a connection. He's about to call out that it's actually the same symbol that's on Uzi's choker, but Uzi cuts him off to keep that detail hidden because she doesn't want Tessa to know that she's also infected the way that Doll is. Now, this symbol is plastered all over the last half of the show, especially the last 2 or 3 episodes, because the lab is a huge focus. It's where the entire plot of a bunch of these episodes takes place, and it's uncovering the mystery of it. This logo is everywhere, but it's directly calling out the connection between Uzi and her mom when it comes to that choker. And what I like about this, the way it's executed here in the comic, the way it's brought up, is that it still uses the principles that I hold very dearly as a storytelling thing, is show, don't tell. Now, obviously, Murder Drones did this to a fault as a show. I feel like some things needed to be explained a bit, but it's still a very important principle in story writing. So while En is about to say, oh, it looks just like the symbol on your necklace, he never actually gets to the point of saying that it's Uzi's necklace because Uzi interrupts him before he can finish that thought. So a reader may think, when they're reading this comic, wait, what was he talking about? The same as what? Because Uzi's like, oh yeah, the Camp 98.7 logo. Yeah, that's what you're talking about. It's like, what was En actually going to say? But it doesn't leave you in the dark, because just like 2 rows down on a couple more panels, we see a close-up of Uzi's necklace before she covers it, trying to hide it from Tessa when she realizes that that's part of the connection, because she knows that that symbol was also on the necklace, which was being worn as a bracelet by Doll, which was originally her mom's necklace. So it actually connects. Oh, that's what En was talking about, because these panels are on the same page as the panel where En's about to call it out. So it's just, you read that and go, oh, what was En talking about? You look down. Oh, that's what he meant. I think it actually works really well, because it shows that, 1, En is smarter than he looks. 2, it adds more to the fact that Uzi is trying to not give Tessa all the information because she doesn't trust her. And it uses show don't tell really well to make clear, hey, that is what we're talking about. Uzi and En are putting the dots together. They know that this lab, whatever they did to Nori and Yeva, that is directly connected to what's happening with Uzi and Doll. So I think it actually is a really nice little change right there, because before it's just enter labs with this symbol and then they move on. Like, there's a little bit of a look, if I recall correctly, from our characters that might be a bit of recognition about the necklace, but it's not as obvious that it's like, oh yeah, that logo is on the necklace, because we haven't gotten a close-up from it at that point in the show in a few episodes. We got a really extreme close-up at the beginning of episode 4, but then nothing for the rest of the episode or in episode 5, and then episode 6 starts up and you're like, yeah, that symbol, pretty sure we've seen that before. But then it's a reminder, yeah, it's on the choker, that is the connection being made, and Uzi's trying to hide the information from Tessa. I think this change works really well. It's a great little addition to it. And another one that's added is a bit of a smaller thing. It's at the opposite end of the story. It's not at the beginning, it's at the very end, pretty much. But I feel like it has a better emotional impact than the way that it plays out in the show. It has to do with shuffling around the events again, which, like I said, that can work. Like earlier when I said Jay and Tessa arriving, being after camping instead of after the prom, that worked really well. And the same kind of thing here. It's with a sequence of events within the same little stretch of a scene. So in the show, the Solver's Miss Me message that it flashes to En when it possesses Uzi happens as she's falling, like mid-fall while Uzi's falling, after En slices off her hand to stop her Solver powers from getting too crazy. But in the comic, the Solver doesn't taunt En just yet. After he slices off her fingers, Uzi falls and her visor is basically dark, and En basically catches her in his arms and like tries to hold her tender. He's like, Uzi, are you okay? And that is when the solver flashes the yellow eyes, the creepy smile, and the miss me message. I think it's actually more effective basically as a jump scare here because it surprises N in a moment where it looks like, oh, I stopped it. My action stopped it. Uzi should be back now. And then it just looks at him and goes, I'm still here. I think it's actually a really good moment. I think it, like I said, it has a bit more of an impact where you could feel, oh, and did it. He stopped it. But a little bit of a flash to say, he didn't stop it. This is far from over. Uzi's just getting worse. And because of the ultimatum that Tessa gave him, that he was going to have to pick between the universe and Uzi, it just shows that N is going to have a lot of pressure on himself going into this final stretch of the story. So I see, like I said, shuffling the events around can actually work a little bit if it adds a bit more of an impact or a bit more of a setup. You know, it took an immovable canon event in the series to do it, but Wyatt Kennedy finally let V be V. He finally let her be who she was meant to be in this series. It's been frustrating. And I said at the beginning of the video that I was extra nervous going into this one, and it's not just because of how the previous comics have mishandled V's character. It's because when the email went out letting backers know, hey, the new issue is about to drop, you can go get the download link for the PDF and everything, the email specifically says, and I'm going to quote it here, Uzi and Tessa and Jay explore JC Jensen's secret underground labs. I was getting legitimately worried when I read that. Wait, are they just going to straight up replace V with J and like swap their characters in the story? I was legitimately nervous about that when I read that email. It gave me honestly a sense of dread as I downloaded it. Like, oh my gosh, they're going to not only assassinate her character, they're going to shove J into a place where she's not supposed to be. And yes, J needed more development, but giving her V's role doesn't do anything to fix it. It just honestly makes both of it worse. But thankfully, that is not how it goes in the comic. It actually played out pretty accurate to the show in this one. And I have to give credit where credit is due. This has had its ups and downs, a lot of downs with this comic series, but this issue actually handled it pretty well. And like I said, which makes it even, I have to say, it makes it weirder that the email said specifically Jay does this when she disappears right at the start of the comic, just like she does in the episode. Like, why mention her at all when she's barely in it? And V is actually playing an important role here because it's her most important scene. It just comes across as a really weird, like, was it a typo? Did they just genuinely hate V's character and Oni Press so much that they just don't even want to mention her and they felt forced to write her best moment in the show? I don't know. The whole thing is weird, but I have to give credit where credit is due. The comic itself, ignoring the weird email, is really solid actually, and it gives us V as she's meant to be. So I honestly think this might have been my favorite. I liked Home as well because it was pretty accurate, but like I said, that one I feel like was because V was barely in it. That's why it was accurate. This one has V in it for a lot, and it's pretty accurate. Like I said, there's a few things like I wish that they had kept, but it also had other changes that I thought were actually pretty cool and worked really well for the storytelling. So this might have been my favorite issue of this comic yet, which is hopefully a good sign that these last two have been solid, that it's going to keep that trend going for the last two issues as we wrap up this series. But up next will be the adaptation of my favorite episode of the series. I love it so much. This one is the first episode I watched like right after it came out because episode 6 was already out by the time I started watching the show. So this is the one I'm like, oh, a new episode's coming out. I finally get to watch a new episode as it comes out. And it blew my mind. It is my favorite episode of the series. So something I am, though, curious about is the fact that based on what we have, like our little cover art tease for the next issue at the end of the current one, is that it looks like Mi-Gyeong is not going to be doing the art, which is weird because at the beginning it's like, oh, obviously Home was different because they announced that after the fact. It had a different artist when they announced it, but at the beginning they're like, oh, a full 6-issue series adapting the show with story written by Wyatt Kennedy and art by Mi-Gyeong. And you're like, oh, okay, that's really cool. But this one, that's not the name that's on the cover art teasing the illustrations. At the end of this one, the cover art for issue 5 names, I wrote down the name. I'm probably going to mispronounce this, and I apologize. I haven't done much research on who this artist is yet. I will do that before next book club to give a little bit of background on who they are, like I did in the first issue of Eabs book club for Joe Mi-Gyeong and White Kennedy. So we have next issue will be illustrated by Gigi Dutroy. I think it's a French name. I don't know how to pronounce that. Again, I will figure that out by next time. But it looks like we're getting a different artist next time who didn't work on Home and hasn't worked on the previous issues of the comics. So I'm curious why this change was made. I don't recall this being announced officially through Kickstarter or anything. Also, does this mean that Gigi's going to end up being the artist for the final issue is for issue 6 or just for issue 5, the next one? If so, why? Like, I'm not complaining. I think it's going to be cool to see different art styles, but I just don't. I think it's a really odd thing that it just seems like, oh, by the way, it's a different artist. No fanfare, no explanations for anything, just different artist. So, again, I'm not against that. I really liked seeing the different art style for Home, even if it still had even if that one had weird issues with the outfits for everyone. The art style itself, I thought, worked really well. So I'm very curious to see what the illustrations for the next issue are going to look like. Because, again, like I said, it is my favorite episode. It has some awesome visuals, and I think that it could be probably the prettiest issue of the comic if they get the art right. So very curious to see how it's going to turn out, but that'll be for next time. So anyway, that's good for this video. Hope you all enjoyed it. Please drop a like and a comment down below if you did. Just subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you all on the next one. Bye, guys!